your host, Riri. Welcome to Reimagining Life from Pain to Purpose, where you'll find a community focused on resilience and perseverance, sharing untold stories of hope and rebuilding while dealing with major life interruption. This podcast is made by and for people in the process of reimagining their lives. We're here to raise the voices of those who often suffer in silence, living with chronic pain and/or disability. This space is for you. We encourage you to get involved. So stick around and let's jump right into the next episode. Welcome to episode 20, where we'll learn about what happens when you refuse to give up on a dream. Our guest today is Marisa Hamamoto, the first professional dancer named to People magazine's Women Changing the World, a leading authority on disability inclusion and building a culture of belonging. Marisa was recently named LinkedIn Top Voice and has been featured on Good Morning America, NBC Today, Forbes, Fast Company, among other media outlets. Marisa is a spinal stroke survivor, a late diagnosed autistic, and a proud fourth-generation Japanese American. She's the founder of Infinite Flow Dance, an award-winning dance company and nonprofit that employs disabled and non-disabled dancers with diverse intersectional identities, with a mission to advance disability inclusion, one dance at a time. I'm sure you're as excited to hear the conversation as I am, so let's jump right in. Okay, welcome, Marisa. I'm so happy to have you here so that you can give our audience an idea of why we have you here. Can you give us a quick overview of who you are and what makes you a reimaginer?
Sure. So my name is Marisa Hamamoto, she, her pronouns. I am a spinal stroke survivor. I'm also a late diagnosed autistic, and I am best known as the founder of Infinite Flow, which is an award-winning dance company and nonprofit based in Los Angeles that employs disabled and non-disabled dancers with diverse intersectional identities with a mission to advance disability inclusion, one dance at a time. And I would say I am on a daily basis imagining what dance is and reimagining the culture of dance as well.
That is fantastic. So now everybody knows why I'm so happy you're here. And I haven't been able to see your group live, but I've seen videos and it's so cool. I encourage everyone to go have a look for themselves. And I'd like to start from the beginning and get a sense about what your life has looked like dealing with the conditions that you have. So what kind of limitations or challenges do you feel like your conditions have created for you in life? How did you help yourself heal?
You know, I usually start with my stroke first, but I'm going to start with my autism because I'm 42 years old today, and I was diagnosed with autism at 40. So for 4 decades of my life, I did not know that I was autistic. But the moment I got my autism diagnosis, there was just so much that I was like, oh, that's what it was. So many challenges I had and so many tendencies that I had that I thought there was something wrong with me. A lot of things that I thought were wrong with me are like, oh, okay, I'm just autistic. So this is everything from having noise sensitivity, not understanding jokes. I mean, as a kid, I feel like I lived many embarrassing moments of everybody laughing over something that someone said and me not understanding why, and fake laughing, for example. There's many incidents in my childhood that I clearly remember where I missed social cues or didn't know how to socially process a situation. Everything from thinking that maybe a friend betrayed me, but not knowing how to cope with that, to just not knowing how to socially interact with people altogether. I think I faked my way through things, which never felt good, but I always thought there was something wrong with me. Why is it that I can't communicate with people? So Yes, I went through that. When we talk about special interests, dance is definitely one of them. But when I tend to get hooked on a subject or something, it's like there's no return. I go full out, full in, I go deep, and I can't see anything around me, which can be good and bad. As an adult, I also have struggled with social anxiety. I do consider myself an extroverted introvert now, not just an introvert, but my job does push me out of my comfort zone to be extroverted. I'm actually noticing more and more that I actually like being social, but I think this limiting belief that there was something wrong with me definitely haunted me over the years. At the same time, I know that a lot of autistics would disagree, but I do see autism as a superpower. I do think that being highly sensitive, being able to hyper focus on something, some of this can lead to many great things. You know, every autistic is different. It's called the autism spectrum. I am an autistic that has low support needs, high IQ. So again, autism shows up in me in one way. Doesn't mean that it shows up the same in others. But yeah, now I am openly autistic, and take me or leave me is my mindset. But I do pick and choose when I reveal that. The other part, talking about disabilities, is that I am a spinal stroke survivor. I was 24 in college when I had a spinal stroke that initially paralyzed me from the neck down. As a dancer, as someone that's been moving their body for years and suddenly being left paralyzed from the neck down in the middle of a dance class was far from what I thought would ever happen in my life. So it was definitely a huge life-changing incident. Without going into the details, I did walk out of the hospital 2 months later. So when people do ask me, but I still have a slightly paralyzed left hand, my left side of the torso, there's part of my left side of the torso that's still numb. I mean, am I still paralyzed? I don't know how to answer that question anymore. But I'll just say that I did walk out of the hospital, and that was a miracle case. I do not consider myself to have a permanent physical disability anymore. Though the last year I have survived 2 car accidents, both times hit from behind, in which I did experience temporary physical disabilities that did require a lot of life management. That also woke me up to so many things. But again, it's been about a year since my first accident. Let's see, 7 months since the second accident. So I want to say that I am past the acute phase, making good progress on the recovery.
You're certainly a survivor, that's for sure.
You know, I'm glad that there's a word called a survivor instead of victim. It's only in the last few years that I really started using the word survivor. And I think being in the disability community, chronic illness, chronic pain, and that community, you start to pick up language. I can refer to myself as a stroke survivor instead of going into this long-winded paragraph about the fact that I had this rare spinal stroke that paralyzed me and yada, yada, yada. No, I'm just a spinal stroke survivor. My stroke did happen in my spinal cord, which is a little unusual of a situation considering that most strokes happen in the brain. But I would say as much as these quote unquote disabilities have had its painful moments and hard moments, I want to say that these moments have taught me a lot and have pushed me to all kinds of creative endeavors.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you found, or did you find that in your community, were there specific places or community organizations that you felt really helped you get you through the journey of creating a more inclusive environment?
I'll be really honest, I was not involved in any communities whatsoever when I first had a stroke, and this was in Japan, 2006. So pre-Facebook. I think Facebook became more of a public thing in 2008 or 9, I believe. So this is pre-social media. Flip phones were the way that we communicated via text. So we had a little bit of internet access through that, but very little, but no social media. I did not even know that there were support groups. I will say I did walk out of the hospital 2 months later. However, I was paralyzed from the neck down. I did go through a lot of trauma, PTSD at that time. I didn't know anything about mental illness and mental health So I never sought help, and I kind of coped with all this depression and PTSD on my own, which in retrospect, it's kind of like, wow, how did I do that?
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with.
Definitely, I don't blame anything on anyone, but my mother, my father, my family had no knowledge around mental health. My personal stigma around mental illness was like, oh, that's just bullshit and that's just fake. And that's because you can't see mental illness, right? It's not something that you can see. Like, oh, that's just fake stuff. But looking back now, yes, I could have used support. I think what got me through that time past the acute stage was two things. One is I happened to go to a Tony Robbins-like seminar. It wasn't Tony Robbins, but the equivalent of a Tony Robbins-like person in Japan named Mr. Aoki-san. His company was called Achievement Corporation. Very, very similar vibe to Tony Robbins, very much about personal development, take action, set goals, define your vision. I mean, all of that was there. And that was my first exposure to personal development. And I was blown away at the fact that there was education, there was life coaching and life education. And I remember, because I was in grad school at this time too, when I was going to this saying, wow, why don't they teach this at school? This education could be very valuable for everyone. Why isn't this taught at school? So that definitely shifted me to reimagine life again. And at this time, I was not dancing. I was actually still scared to dance. Stroke did happen inside of a dance studio, so I was still dealing with PTSD, but it got me to visualize what my future could be. And it was undeniable that dance was going to be in there. So that was one thing that helped. The other thing is this: Japan has a Christian population of maybe 1%. So it's a very tiny population.
Yeah.
But I happened to go to a fasting detox center for a short period of time that happened to be a Christian fasting center. And I went to this fasting center because I was taking this medication post-stroke that was supposed to keep my blood clean and clear. And I was taking this thing every day, and I didn't see the point. And one day I looked at my skin and it looked green. And I'm like, what is this? And the only thing I can think of is it's got to be this medication. So I went to my doctor and said, how long do I really have to take this medication? I feel like I'm fine. I feel like I don't need this. And the doctor said, well, no, technically you're supposed to take this for the rest of your life. And I said, excuse me? And then I asked the doctor, what does this medication exactly do? And basically, and again, I'm not a medical person, so this is just in my own words, but basically what the medication did was it made my blood clean and clear so that it didn't clog up the arteries and the blood that's being brought to my spinal cord and my brain. So it was all about stroke prevention. So I asked him, well, if I find a different way to keep my blood clean and clear, is it okay? And he said, look, I can't say yes to that, but you need to keep your blood clean and clear. So I did a little bit of research on how to make that happen, and fasting and detox started popping up. And so the only place I can afford to go fasting at that time was a Christian fasting center that almost charged nothing to go to. I will say the power of prayer. I think what I got out of all of this was just knowing that there is a higher power that is overseeing my life and my well-being. And even though I was never Christian, I also realized during that time that I am spiritual. I've always been spiritual. My family has been spiritual. There's always an ancestor that's protecting us. And when this comes up in my mom's mouth, grandma is protecting us. Grandma saved you from dying. The stroke, that's grandma who saved you. So I've always heard about ancestors protecting us. So just the power of prayer, the power of believing that there's a higher power, some of that did have a pretty big impact in my recovery and mindset.
It sounds like it. That's really interesting. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Infinite Flow. So how did this come about, and what are your hopes and dreams for the future?
Absolutely. So Infinite Flow, as I said, is a nonprofit and dance company that employs disabled and non-disabled dancers with diverse intersectional identities. And how Infinite Flow came about, the short story is that my spinal stroke led to Infinite Flow. But there's a little bit more to that. I would say, to sum it up, I grew up loving to dance. But the moment I started to pursue a professional dance career, I started to live in this duality. And that duality was that I know in my gut that dance is a universal language that belongs to everyone. Yet the dance industry and society seemed like dance was only accessible to a few. My body was constantly criticized for not being enough, not fitting into the box of a certain dancer, whether it's a ballerina or whatever it may be. My joints and my body was not made for dance, is what I was told all the time. Occasionally, my skin color was not directly criticized, but when you're placed in the end of a line amongst other dancers that are white, and that happens a couple times, and clearly height-wise should be a couple dancers in, you start to kind of question, was that because of my race or what was that? Or stereotypically with Nutcrackers, I was casted in the Chinese role, things like that. Long story short, I never made it as a ballerina, even though I tried. But later on, when I came back to dancing, I did dance on and off throughout my college years. The stroke happened inside of a contemporary dance class. While I was in college in Japan, I did kind of start this freelance career as a professional dancer. So my first paycheck did come from performing in the ensemble of the Tokyo Opera as a dancer, not as a singer, thank goodness. Oh my gosh. Don't ask me to sing. I tried, but no, singing is not my gift. Yeah, when I came back into dancing after my stroke 3.5 years later, I discovered salsa dancing and ballroom dancing and fell in love with it. It was part of my rehab, part of my physical rehab, part of my emotional rehab. I became addicted. I got certified as a professional ballroom dance teacher. I moved back to Southern California where my family was, and then eventually migrated to LA to pursue a professional dance career. And I started to run into the same challenges, which was, again, the duality, knowing that dance is a universal language that belongs to everyone. Yet when it came to the representation of film and TV, I was not represented as an Asian American ballroom dancer, salsa dancer. I was just told that I didn't have the right look to make it. And I was like, okay, why am I going through the same thing again? But being older now, close to 30, 29, 30, and relaunching a dance career at that late 20s age, which in itself is kind of a miracle.
Yeah.
I realized that there's nothing wrong with my body or my ethnicity. What was wrong was society's biases and the stereotypes and discrimination. And I wanted to be part of the change. And one thing led to another along that journey. When I was starting to question all these biases and ask myself, well, who's left out? I started to recognize that disabled people didn't have a place to dance and disabled people were not represented. And I really felt a calling to do something about it, but I didn't really know how. And along the journey of just soul searching, there's several things that happen, several things that just synchro. When things are meant to be, the universe will bring you the opportunities needed to carry forward a greater mission that's meant for you. So that's exactly what happened. And within that journey, I met Adelpho, a paraplegic wheelchair bodybuilder. And I saw some videos of him. I think I initially found him on YouTube, or I think it was a website. And I followed him on Instagram and Facebook and saw that he lived pretty close to where I was living in Long Beach. And it was like 30 miles away. And I said, well, I wonder if he'd be interested in dancing with me. So I literally just friended him on Facebook, messaged him, and stalked him on social media a few days, and then messaged him. And then he willingly said, sure, I'll give it a shot. And I said, okay. Yeah, we barely knew each other, but we ended up meeting inside of a dance studio a couple days later, and he didn't know how to count the music. He clearly didn't have any formal dance training, but I can also tell, though, he was not the type of guy that would get up onto the dance floor and start dancing either. So this guy was just very new to dance altogether. But again, he's a bodybuilder. He's got all these big, huge muscles. So he definitely is connected to his body in some way, shape, or form. But anyways, I went into the situation with a lot of fear. I had never really danced with someone using a wheelchair, and I didn't know what I was getting into. There was also the ego part that was coming out saying, well, no, I'm supposed to be the dance teacher. I'm the professional here. I need to know that I know what I'm doing and yada, yada, yada. But anyways, I went into this situation very nervous with a lot of fear. But interestingly, after a couple hours of just being in the studio, just experimentally moving with the Delpho, there was a moment that I will never forget, which was this moment where I realized that dancing with the Delpho was actually not much different from dancing with anyone else who was dancing on 2 feet. And it was just a moment, literally a moment, but it was a breakthrough moment. And I couldn't help but think, wow, when you're dancing with someone, you see beyond labels, you see beyond race, color, size, age, gender, disability, sexual orientation, social status, all of the above. It was a breakthrough moment. I felt like I wanted to share this moment to as many people as possible. And one thing led to the next, and that became Infinite Flow.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. That takes a lot of drive and dedication. And I know that you started with Adelpho. So in your dance company, do you have people who have all different kinds or types of disabilities? Or is it mostly mobility challenges?
I'm going to be very careful with the words I use here. So our mission is to advance disability inclusion. We represent all types of disabilities, and we have a very broad definition of disability. Self-identification is basically prioritized over a medical diagnosis because, as you know, not everyone has access to a formal diagnosis, especially for late diagnosed autism, ADHD, neurodivergence, etc. So we represent across disabilities. Now, the dance company itself also has a variety of disabilities represented: deaf, blind, paraplegia, EDS, chronic illness, chronic pain, neurodivergent, mental illness. It is an array of things, but do we represent every single thing under the sun? No, we don't. But the idea here, the idea here is to promote the idea of disability inclusion. And going back to our mission statement, which basically is to advance disability inclusion one dance at a time. So we are cross disability. I think the thing that I can attest to is that we don't represent a specific disability. For example, there might be the Spinal Bifida Association, in which it is focused on people with spinal bifida and friends and family. That's the focus. From that perspective, we are cross disability. And again, broad definition of disability, I have learned through my community that a disability is not just from a diagnosis. Some people with a medical diagnosis that could be traditionally labeled as a disability don't consider themselves disabled either. So we want to honor that. So it is a broad definition of disability. When we're writing grant applications, it's oftentimes hard to explain, but for the most part, the idea here is dance is the universal language. Dance belongs to everyone. Every single person with whatever situation they're in has the right to live a good life and thrive and belong. So we're just one piece of the puzzle of solving that problem.
Wow, that's really awesome. I know you mentioned that you pay your dancers. I don't know if that's unique in the dance world, but I think that's pretty important in the disability community. And I'm just curious, how did you make that happen? And how did you make this organization a real place to be?
Well, you're asking a pretty deep question. I'll do my best. I'll do my best to summarize. When I was growing up, aspiring to be a professional ballet dancer, the only way that I was told I can become a professional ballerina is if I auditioned for a professional ballet company and they took me. If that happens, I get to call myself a professional ballet dancer. That's what I was told. Then in college, I received my first paycheck as a dancer. It was a $2,500 check over a project that I think spanned about 5 weeks, including the performances. And that woke me up saying, oh, maybe I'm a professional dancer now because I just got paid to perform. And I remember at that time, I started to question, so what the hell is a professional dancer? And it's debatable. on what a professional dancer is. I think if you just label yourself a professional dancer and you get paid for dancing, then so be it. For a while too, I thought I had to be making a living with dance to call myself a professional dancer, not just a check here and there. I'll say today that that's not quite the case. Going back to your question about how did Infinite Flow become a professional dance company? Well, first of all, there is a plethora of professional dance companies that exist. So in other words, these dance companies put on shows, dancers get paid for their work. Just like a doctor gets paid to be a doctor, a school teacher gets paid to be a school teacher. There are professional dancers, whether they're employed by one dance company or one institution, or they're freelance and they earn their way through project. For a dance company with disabled dancers, yes, they do exist. I am not the first one. Infinite Flow is not the first one. There are a few that have preceded me. And I will say, these few dance companies that have preceded me did allow me to realize that I can do that too. I'll do it in my way with my own creative vision. At the very beginning of Infinite Flow, I was already a professional dancer. I was making a living out of dance between performing and teaching at that time.
Okay.
I was already a dance professional. I feel like dance professional is a better word because that encompasses choreographers, dance educators, people that lead dance programming, etc. So I was already a dance professional. And my vision with Infinite Flow when I first started this, and it's still close to what it is today, it was a world-class professional dance company. At that time, it was a wheelchair dance company, a wheelchair ballroom dance company was what I was going for. Now, because we represent cross disability, it's different, but it was a professional entertainment company is what I had in mind. And I'll say that in the early days, the talent was there. Started off with Adelpho and Mia, both wheelchair dancers, myself, and a non-disabled ballroom dancer that I was working with at that time. The four of us started this, and I just called it a professional dance company. Like, seriously, I was like, hey, y'all, we're just going to fake it till we make it,
Exactly.
Was kind of how it was. Did I take a risk? Yeah. Did some of the dance companies that employ disabled dancers that came previously, did they kind of look at that going, who the hell is she? I'm pretty sure they did, I'm pretty sure they did. But I just kind of started it and I said, all right, let's see where this goes. And I will say it is important to pay artists. It is important to pay disabled folks. It is important to pay disabled artists, period. I do want to be very mindful to say just because we're inclusive doesn't mean we hire everyone. Just like any company, it's not like we have a million positions. Not everybody is a fit to be working with us. We're not always in need of new dancers.
I think that's a lot to be proud of. That's really cool. I think I have an answer to this myself, but I'm interested to hear what you would say. Do you think that growing up the way you did with people telling you that you couldn't be a dancer and all the challenges that you had, did that help you develop your career?
Yeah, I would say things happened for me rather than to me. And that's a pretty cliche saying that's tossed around in the motivational space, but it is true. I think all of these life experiences, good and bad, have all added up to me uncovering a purpose. I don't want to say my life purpose because I feel like our purpose shifts and changes throughout our lives, but led to a greater purpose for good, led to a very interesting, eccentric dance career that's constantly evolving. Would I have changed anything? No. Could I have done better in communicating XYZ or communicating with so-and-so? Oh, there's tons of that. I wish I knew I was autistic a little earlier, if there's anything. I think there's some communication patterns I see in the past that I wish I could redo. But okay, putting those things aside in terms of my stroke, my autism, not fitting the boxes, dealing with all of that, I think it led to what I do today. And it led to a plethora of opportunities, led to filling a lot of gaps, not just on the disability front, but also a intersectional lens of disability, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. From your perspective, now that you have some experience in this and you've grown so much yourself and with your organization, I have two questions for you. The first one is, what does success look like to you?
So for me, success can be defined in your own terms. Each person's success is going to be different on how they succeed and what they perceive as success. So it's kind of like whatever you decide, you make it. Now, for me personally, I'm still in the process of defining what that is, to be very honest with you. But I'll just say that I want to be able to use all of my gifts and be able to live at my full potential and also experience life at the fullest all at once. And I believe that we don't need to live in a world of this or that, but this and that. I spent the last 9 years very much devoting my entire life to infinite flow and the growth. And I still am very committed to infinite flow, and it still is a massive part of my life. But I also recognize that there's other aspects of my life that are also important. Other things in business and career that might intersect with infinite flow's work that are also emerging to be of interest and importance too. So just navigating all of that. But I think being able to live at my full potential and being able to be visible at my full potential, use my gifts at my full potential, all of that is, I would say, along the lines of what I consider success is. And I do think that we are all born with gifts and talents that we're here to serve the world with. And I feel like there are more gifts that I have not discovered yet that I feel like I have to offer.
Can you tell me, what have you learned working in Infinite Flow over the last several years? How have you seen changes and what have been your observations?
Oh gosh, this can be a 2-hour, maybe a
I know.
48-hour conversation.
The first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is that people with disabilities are all people and humans. Just like you have different types of people outside of that, you have different types of people within people with disabilities. We are not a monolith. We don't always all get along with each other, and that's just human. And I think sometimes people have this stigma around disability, but at the same time, they think that it's this space where everybody kind of clumps up together, when that's not always the case. There's not as much diversity within people with disabilities as outside of that. I think what I've learned is that, again, I came in with a lot of stigma and a lot of misconceptions of disability going into this work, even though I myself have been disabled my whole life, apparently, and undoing a lot of that and recognizing that we don't want to ever assume what someone can do and can't do ever, and recognizing that there's just so much talent and capability within this space is something that I really enjoy in being in the space. I think honoring access needs is something that is beneficial for everyone, not just the person that needs those access needs. We all have access needs. We all need accommodations. We're all different. And so having disabled people at the table, on the team, involved is very important for those reasons. This world would be a different place if we place disability inclusion first, not last. I mean, some of the greatest inventions in the world have been designed for disability. So whether it's the typewriter that was invented as a result of a blind woman wanting to write a love letter, email that was invented by a deaf engineer that was looking for a solution to communicate with his deaf wife, etc. I mean, there's lots of historical examples that prove that designing for disability led to incredible innovation. And so I ask, what would the world look like if we placed disability inclusion first, not last? And it's something that I don't have an answer to, but it's a great question to ask, and it's a great question to start acting on.
One of the other things I learned through Infinite Flow is that really everybody can really dance. Through Infinite Flow, I have worked with so many different types of dancers with so many different types of bodies. I have worked with dancers who are not able to walk, not able to hear, not able to see, has one arm, one leg, no legs, no arms, different ways of learning, different ways of processing music, different ways of processing dance, different walks of life. I have really worked with dancers of all levels too, all stages of life, all ages, different goals. And what's interesting is everybody has a response and a connection to dance, even if they don't even consider themselves dancers. And I think through this work, I've really come to appreciate the diversity of the human race just altogether. I think if we're talking about, say, the topic of beauty, for example, I feel like there's definitely some messages out there in our society that beauty has to look a certain way. Through this work, it's like I see the beauty in everyone. And other than the fact that people that I never thought I would have a connection with, I have been able to develop some very deep, enriching, fulfilling connections through the work I do at Infinite Flow. I also feel like our work transcends, even though our current mission is to advance disability inclusion one dance at a time, I'm slowly starting to feel like our mission even transcends that. And I haven't been able to quite articulate that in words. And that's been maybe one of the challenging things. You can feel and see and experience the impact that we have. I don't always have the words to describe all of that. So that's been my challenge as CEO and as the leader of this, is to be able to articulate what we do in words, because we need those words, whether it's raising money, raising resources, bringing our work to life to those who may feel very disconnected from dance, but will want an intellectual explanation of something first before the dancing itself. But what else have I learned at Infinite Flow? I think this is more from me as a leader, I would say, than the actual work at Infinite Flow. But Infinite Flow started with no seed money and no strategy. And I've kind of let things grow and evolve organically. And I used to have a lot of insecurity around that. I used to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm such a bad strategist. I'm just such a bad planner. Why are some people able to put a pitch deck and go and pitch it and have such a concrete plan with very clear impact metrics? I used to have a lot of insecurity over not having done that part and growing a company. But now I feel like how I've grown Infinite Flow is the way it was supposed to grow organically. I think me as a leader, I've learned to surrender. I've learned to kind of be intentional with what we create and what we put out there, but afterward, kind of surrender to what happens next and where things go. Through Infinite Flow, I've also learned that as much as we want society to be inclusive of people with disabilities, we also want people with disabilities, and in this case, disabled artists, to step up to the plate. It needs to work both ways. I think as a society, we need to learn to be inclusive, meet people where they're at, but as disabled people, we need to also level up. And I'm speaking about myself as a person with multiple non-apparent disabilities too. And it's like, it's a dance. I think I've learned through the work that I do that most people are capable of a little bit more than they think, even though it's not typical way of thinking about things, especially in our disability and chronic illness communities. It's not the typical way, but I have noticed that most people are capable a little bit more than they think, and capable of things that they may not thought was possible. But I've also learned that journey is very different per person. So even for myself, like when I find myself trying to put someone in a box and it's not working, usually after some time, I kind of step back, go, oh, hold on here. What are we doing? This person and this person, these two dancers might have a similar disability, They might be in a similar age bracket, similar experiences, but these two are not the same. So let's not put that person in a box. So yeah, I've learned a lot. I mean, I can go on and on about this.
You've really touched on a number of things that I think are really important about how people can often do a little bit more than maybe they're comfortable with. So maybe pushing a little bit just outside the comfort zone, and also learning to dance within this dance company. I mean, learning about how to let it grow, and all these lessons that you've learned are really important and apply to so many different scenarios. So I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my next question is a little bit different. What's something that you've learned that you wish other people would understand?
How much effort and hard work I've put into the work that we do.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Infinite Flow is approaching 10 years.
Wow.
I mean, it's kind of surreal. Am I proud? Yes. Am I also feeling a little bit of, ooh, I feel like we should be a little bit further ahead than where we're at right now? Yes, I'm feeling both. I'm proud of everything we've accomplished, but I always feel like there's so much more. So I'm kind of torn between those two. But I would say that it's a lot of hard work that has been put in behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always feel like I get the credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, I have also realized that a lot of people may not know what I do behind the scenes. 'Cause I don't share about it. So I want to bring Infinite Flow's work to the next level and more. I am also at a place where I want to take my own artistry and my own storytelling and my own craft as Marisa to the next level.
Okay.
I mean, you would think that the two are the same. And yes, there's a lot of overlap here. But I think in a way, I've been afraid to put myself out there. This sounds very contrary to what people probably see me as if they Google my name. But I have realized that I have held myself back because I've been scared to get out of my own limitations and some of my own old stories. I don't want to go into like too woo-woo of a world, but some of this is like inner child healing, inner child wounds that are still there, like little Marisa who was shy and who never felt like they belonged and was the last one chosen on the team, and all that stuff is still kind of hiding.
What sounds like what you were just saying about other people, how they can often do a little bit more than they think they can. Maybe you're feeling the same way about yourself.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit. I think a lot of founders, like passionate founders of organizations, kind of go through a period where at some point the organization and you become one and it feels good. But then after a while, you're like, hold on, I'm not my organization. I'm me. The organization is part of me, but not all of me. So I definitely have gone through that state and that dance of knowing that Infinite Flow is a part of me, but not all of me.
Yeah.
People still associate me with Infinite Flow, and that's great. But there is a part of me that's like, hey, that's part of me. That's not all of me.
Okay.
And I feel like that gap is also what's missing from the next level of Infinite Flow. I think I've gotten in my own way in terms of bringing our companies to the next level. I would say a year ago, I would have not been comfortable to admit this in an interview, but recently I feel like I've met people that have kind of gone through the same metamorphosis. So I'm like, oh, okay, this is not just me. A lot of people have gone through this where maybe their work and themselves are not congruent. Your work is not all of you. So.
Right, for sure. Well, that's very brave of you to share, and I appreciate the openness. I'm sure it applies to a lot of people, so I'm sure you're not alone. Now we've come to our rapid fire 5 for 5 questions. Please answer honestly and quickly, whatever comes to mind. So the first one is, what's your favorite sound?
Silence.
Okay. What's your favorite word?
Purpose.
Good one. Okay. What's your favorite guilty pleasure? It doesn't have to be guilty.
Chocolate.
Yes. And what's something that you've learned that you wish people would understand?
That's a hard one. I mean, it's not about what do you think other people should know that they don't know. I think it's more me recognizing that I deserve to pursue whatever that is in my heart unapologetically, that I don't need to be boxed in on anything.
Okay. So one more question for you. And this one is kind of a short answer one. What advice would you give to an 18-year-old you?
18-year-old me, the first thing that comes up is that there are an infinite number of paths to success. It's not just one. And success does not look the same per person. And it's not meant to, and it doesn't have to. So stop trying to put yourself into a box.
That's a good one.
I wish someone had told me that, hey, you're here to actually pave your own path. You're not here to follow someone else's. You're here to follow a path that's unique to you. I look back at my 18-year-old self and I thought that becoming a professional ballerina and dancing with American Ballet Theater was what success was. And if I didn't achieve that, I would be a failure. I was in an environment of dance where that's what was enforced in a way. Now I see things very differently. I would say I feel so blessed and grateful to have found and carved a unique path, a purpose-driven path. I've even gotten to the place where I feel like some people in our dance world see me as a beacon of light that is paving a new path for other artists. And I'm like, okay, But I do think that if I were to look at myself from the outside in, yeah, they're right. They're right. I wish I knew of a dancer like myself when I was a kid, but I didn't know anyone that had a path like me or looked like me.
You're paving the way for others. I think that's awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. Those are all the questions I have. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
I'm good, Riri.
All right, well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I can't wait to see what's next for you, Marisa, and for Infinite Flow.
I will say above everything, I'm really grateful to do the work I do. I think more than anything, I am so grateful to have met wonderful people along my path and meet people like yourself. I would love to meet you in person. I will just make sure that you're on my list of people to contact. But yeah, I think that a lot of the fulfillment of my work has come through the people I meet, and I can't thank the world enough.
What a wonderful way to wrap up the interview. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Marisa. In this episode, we learned about Marisa's journey with dance and her personal challenges throughout her life. Marisa's story is one of both physical and emotional strength, as she dealt with the rejection that many dancers face, including shaming about her body not being what was considered a dancer's body. Determined to keep doing what she loved and was passionate about, Marisa never gave up. After recovering from a spinal stroke, Marisa went back to dance with a fresh perspective and eventually founded Infinite Flow Dance Company, a welcoming space that does not discriminate based on physical aptitude. One of the things that makes Infinite Flow such a wonderful example for others is that it features dancers of all different abilities dancing together. The company uses a very broad definition of self-identified disability, which is prioritized over medical diagnoses, recognizing that not everyone has access to an official diagnosis. The dance company proudly has broad representation across disabilities, including people who are deaf, blind, paraplegic, have chronic pain, mental illness, or other conditions. Marisa's strength and determination to follow what she believes, including that dance is a universal language that belongs to everyone, led her to create something new that benefited both people with disabilities and able-bodied dancers. Her example further highlights that making things more accessible only makes them better for everyone. Thanks for listening to Reimagining Life from Pain to Purpose. We're always interested to hear your feedback and questions. So leave a review and drop us a note at reimagininglifepodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. We hope you'll tune in for the next episode.